Good morning. Guess what day it is? It's July 25th. There are a couple of things going on today. It's Thread the Needle Day and it's National Carousel Day. So I'm going to give you some information about carousels, and this is from a place called Volo Museum. Today we know these classic amusement rides to have beautiful rotating centers with platforms of crafted horses galloping in circles. Also called merry-go-rounds, jumpers, horseabouts, gallopers, and flying horses. Carousels originated from an interesting past that dates back more than 1,000 years. The concept of a carousel machine originated in the 6th century in the Byzantine, known today as Istanbul. The invention had a rotating center with poles that reached outward. Tied to the poles were baskets that swung riders in a circle. This concept ties to the 12th century when horsemen began using the device for battle training. Inspiration for the merry-go-round we know today came from 12th century Asia and Europe. Horsemen would play jousting competitions using the same concept from the centuries before. It was a way for them to practice their cavalry riding skills for combat training. Initially, they would ride atop horses in a circle. When the 12th and 17th century carousels were ideal for battle practice, jousting games and spearing competitions, the 18th century saw a change from practical use to entertainment. The popularity of the merry-go-round began in the 18th century when carousels started arriving in Europe and English fairgrounds. Families in the carousel line of business would craft the animals of wood during the winter, then tour during the warmer months around the country. These 18th century carousels didn't have platforms with the horses. Instead, they had seats that hung from chains. The gallopers were lightweight and small, so a man or mule could operate the machine. The first merry-go-round known in the U.S. was in Salem, Massachusetts in 1799. It was referred to as the wooden horse circle ride. Carousels in the United States were much larger than those found in Europe and England, with much more elaborate woodwork. In the 19th century, European carousels were remodeled to have platforms with figures fixed to the base, the same concept we know and ride on today. Newer carousels were called dobies and still rotated with chariots and animals, but instead of the free-flying horses and seats on the earlier version, the 18th century carousel figures were pole-mounted. There are many styles of carousels in the U.S. There's the Coney Island style. These carousels feature elaborate and jeweled saddles. There's the Philadelphia style. In Philadelphia, they had more realistic saddles. And then there's the county fair style, which featured carousels often with the horses having no saddles. While the merry-go-rounds found popularity at fairs in the 18th century, they became even more popular in amusement parks during the mid-1800s. And even though the carousel was undergoing many evolutions, the machines were still operated manually. It worked by a human, and they would use a hand crank or a pull rope to rotate the center poles. If a mule or horse was used, rotating the machine, they would be attached to a pole and move around the carousel. In the middle of the 19th century, power was starting to become a major downfall. Thomas Bradshaw came along. He invented the first steam-powered carousel in 1861. One of the greatest carousels of all time was 269 hand-carved animals, more than 20,000 lights, and 182 chandeliers, along with hundreds of angels hanging above the ride. The House of the Rock, located in Spring Green, Wisconsin, features this stunning merry-go-round. The oldest carousel in the United States is the Flying Horse Carousel in Oak Bluffs, Massachusetts. It was constructed in 1876 by Charles Dare. Amusement parks needed carousels that were reliable. So the use of electric motors became prevalent in the industry. Thanks to the electric motors, they are easier to service and the replacement parts can be found easily. So originally, if you listened at the very beginning, carousels were used to train people for battle. Did you know that if you're a Christian, you are in a battle? Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness." So how are we supposed to be able to fight? We need to evaluate our relationship with God first, because we cannot defeat the enemy alone. Jesus said in Luke 14:31, "Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? So considering our enemy, we must conclude we cannot win without God. Proverbs 21:31 says, "The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but deliverance is of the Lord." 2 Chronicles 20:15 says, "And he said, Listen, all of you of Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem, and you, King Jehoshaphat. Thus says the Lord to you, do not be afraid, nor dismayed because of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's." So today, remember, you are not alone in your battle with evil. The battle is God's. Trust Him.